Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for the Let Me Introduce You podcast. I am Jen. This is Adarian. Today, we are taking a shift away from injuries. We've talked about ACL injuries and some of the protocols regarding return to play. We've talked about hamstring strains and, again, common exercise interventions, particularly the Nordic. We are moving into the big toe or the great toe, depending on what
is that the one they call the hallux?
That's the one they call the hallux. This important magical place that is supposed to do all these incredible things. So we're going to start with, does the big toe actually provide leverage for us to push off on during running?
No. Next question.
Okay. So if it's not providing leverage for us to push off on during running, what is it doing?
Nothing. No. This is funny. You're not going to be funny today. No, I mean, the thing is, if you look, you have to look at the big toe. So a lot of times, there's this big toe, and so we have there's two parts to it.
Yes.
And if we look at the other toes, there's three parts to them. So we have this thing with two parts to it, and then it runs into this. It connects with this, with the first metatarsal.
Yes.
And they have this MTP joint. They call the first. Metatarsal filane.
Oh, I've got all the words. I will share all the words in a second after we get through this.
Yeah. So you have this thing. So then you go, okay. People say push off with the big toe.
Right.
But because it's only two pieces, it doesn't have the flexibility to push off. It just doesn't have the flexibility, the mobility to do what people are trying to do with it as far as push off. And then also too, the big toe, you got to look at the degrees of freedom, where it could, up, down, left, right, roll right, or pitch up, pitch down, yaw left, yaw right, or roll left or roll. So it has these things it could do at this joint that's kind of cool,
Yeah.
So, but a lot of times too, the biggest thing about the big toe is it's more of an anchor. It's a break. It's a good break. It's a good anchor. But at the same time, you got to think about things in motion. So we have to think about things in motion. And so I want to move towards this tip of something. So when the foot's on the ground underneath pressure, we know what? It doesn't want to move. So at that point in time, trying to press off the big toe goes against the rotation. But if you try to lift up the big toe, it actually will help you roll forward. That's the beauty of it. It works in reverse.
So if we're trying to lift up the big toe as we move forward over it, doesn't that imply that there needs to be a lot of big toe extension?
That's a bad word, big toe extension.
I've just, we've got to talk. These are the words that people throw around, right? Like,
well, no. If you look at the name of the muscles, flexor, extender. They say flex, but up and down is still flexing. Pitch is pitch. That's all I'm saying. They say extending, but really extending would be move away vertically or horizontally from the MTP joint. That would be extension, but people don't call that extension. They call the other one extension. You go, that's flexing though. And the other way is flexing too. Okay. Pitch, yaw, and roll. I get it. Pitch up, pitch down. So, so the thing is, and people at home, this is what you got to do. And you got to look at how these things work. A lot of times people try to work things when the legs are straight. And that's not how we operate. We got to go back to some basic crawl pass, things like that. But now, if you are sitting in a chair, go ahead and press your big toe into the ground. It just draws the heel towards the big toe.
Right.
It just draws, Now, go ahead and raise the big toe up, Now, at that point in time, same thing. That's really going to happen.
Right.
Now, this is where the fun starts at. Go ahead and put pressure on the big toe. Now, if you put pressure on the big toe and you push it down, nothing happens. Nothing at all is going to happen.
Right.
But if you put pressure where your knee's hanging out of the front, you got weight on it, and you pull up the big toe, it actually will pull your knee forward.
Okay. Yes.
So we're not thinking. So we think from this stand tall position of things, right. Or we think from this dead position. This thing is dead, and watch what it does when I put electricity to it. Which at that point, it makes sense because of how things will work. Yeah, it's going to do. But what happens once you put weight on this thing?
Right.
Then it becomes a good anchor. And remember, anchors do what? Slow things down so something else can move. So you have this anchor that's going to slow down. So what? So I can keep it in and move forward. So in that sense, yeah, it is great for that. And it's big enough to hold off on that type of leverage.
Yes.
The other four toes, they're not big enough to do that.
Right.
So now the other part about this too is, and once again, people at home, you have to do this from, like I said, you have to do this from not a standing tall position, knee locked out position, but you have to do this from my knees are bent position. And like I said, once you weight over it, once you pull up the big toe, it continues that forward movement. If you press down the big toe, it stops you from moving forward.
Which I think almost everybody's experienced when they're about to like tumble forward and they don't want to.
Tumble
right?
over and toes bite down. Why do you think the toes are biting down? To stop you.
Yeah.
If you pull your toes up at that time, bloop, 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 tumble you go.
Yes.
So that's the cool thing is that, yeah, the big toe, for what it's worth, is kind of opposite what people think. It's a great anchor. It's a great break, but it's not good to try and push up or propel yourself. It's not really good for that. Just because of the structure. It only got two pieces versus the other ones, but like I said, once again, once you see these joints in the structure and how, like I said, you got another windlass mechanism. Because remember, you got this band, you got this muscle, this long tendon runs underneath this band. When you pull on that, that's another windlass mechanism. It's kind of cool.
Which brings us to the structure of the big toe is really important, right? I'm going to throw out all the fancy words right now.
Okay.
I looked it up. So we should, just in case you guys are all curious at home, the big toe is a gangliomoarthroidal joint. It's a ball and socket hinge joint. That's what that means, with a sliding component. So what's the sliding component on the big toe?
Well, okay. So once again, what can it do? Up, down, pitch, pitch.
Right.
Yeah, and roll.
Mm-hmm. So
if it's rolling, what's it really doing? Sliding. If it's yawing, what's it doing? It's really sliding.
Okay.
And you get the sliding part too. This is not a slide, but you got to remember, the big toe can actually be pulled away from the MTP joint and pulled back into the MTP joint.
Right. Which is going to
flex up and down.
And if you slide it away from the MTP joint, that's going to alter, right? Its braking mechanism, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
And if you slide it back in, that's also going to alter your braking mechanism.
Right. But if you slide it away, this is the cool part. So if you slide it away, you actually make the band tighter. Mm-hmm. So the part of the fascia that runs underneath it and all that, you actually make that tighter. So you get a different, that's the alteration is I'm going to make this, I'm like tuning this thing now. I can make it tighter, I can make it looser, whatever I'm going to do. So and think about this, when do I want to make it looser? When do I want to make it tighter? So once again, it's the cool part. So if once again, people think you're standing tall. If you're standing tall, none of this works. What are we talking about right now? You're standing tall with your knees locked out, none of this works.
Which isn't what you would do during movement anyway. Like this is not how movement works. But
when people talk about movement, they describe it as if you are when nobody moves, when the knees are locked out, everybody's bent.
Right.
So once you are squatted down and say the knees are slightly over, and you push that thing away, now all of a sudden you get great access to that space in between.
Yeah.
And now this thing is really planted. It's really planted into the ground. If you same thing and you pull it back, then all of a sudden it scrunches up your foot. And at that point in time, you want to do what? Get off the foot. So one of them makes you want to stay on the foot. One of them makes you want to get off the foot.
Oh, so that's actually super useful depending on what you're trying to do.
To what you're trying to do.
Like understanding that.
Right. So one of them makes you want to stay on the foot. One of them makes you want to get off the foot. So it becomes this thing. So think about in running, where I may want to get off the foot.
Right.
Or I may want to be in between, where I'm going to actually back and forth.
Yeah. Well, so or like if you land, like if you're doing like a precision jump in parkour or something that requires that level of like accuracy with your balance.
Right.
Being able to fine tune that would help with.
Yep. Yeah.
your
So you
stability.
get these cool things that it could do. I mean, it's a fascinating piece, because the other toes can't do all this stuff.
Right.
Even though they're still MTP joints, they don't get the, you can't, you try to extend the second toe, it's like, yeah, whatever. The other
Well,
toes like, yeah, whatever.
and the other thing that I found really interesting when I was reading through the anatomy of the big toe is which you've told me before, but it's concave. It's got an arch shape to it.
Yeah, on the side and underneath, yeah.
Which that implies that it's meant to be a pretty stable structure that can bear load.
Right. It wants to bear load, but not a pushing load. It can bear load.
Right.
It just don't want you to be trying to push off of it to the, because it has to bear load. Because why? Because you got to think about the reverse leverage that's placed upon it. Because, and that's what people don't understand. Pressure comes from leverage. And so that's why, once again, if you stand up, there's not much pressure on the feet because there's no leverage on the feet.
Right.
But as soon as you squat down, you start getting leverage. And that's why you squat down, lean forward a slight bit. Now there's pressure there because that's based on the leverage. So yeah, so it's able to withstand the leverage of the upper body against it.
That makes sense.
So, and that's why, it can take great, but what people tend to do is they tend to flex at the MTP joint and it gets pulled apart. That's when you start having, these other issues because you're pulling apart the MTP joint based on this leverage. They can't handle that.
And the MTP joint, to be clear for everybody listening at home, is going to be the ball of the first metatarsal, like the first metatarsal ball of the foot, right?
Yeah, the area right in front. Yeah. Because the ball of the foot is technically the sesamo bones.
Well, I was about to say, because that area is super important because you have these two sesamoid bones that run one slightly in front, one slightly behind.
Right. So that would technically be the ball of the foot is where those sesamo bones are. And the MTP joint is right in front of it. And they work together to make these things happen. Because, like I said, because it elevates the big toe to be free. So there's no pressure on the big toe until you leverage on it.
Right.
Versus the other toes can have pressure all the time. Nobody cares. But the big toe has to be free to move and everything. So the sesamo bones keeps pressure off the big toe until you actually require it by leverage.
And the sesamoid bones are really interesting. Did you know they have their own artery?
No, I didn't know. See?
So this area is more important, I think, than we often give it credit for.
Well, once again, people didn't look at the structure.
Yeah.
They just said, hey, this looks like a good windlass mechanism and was done with it. But they didn't see all the other things like, oh, that's a pivot point, that's a fulcrum point, that's this point. Because of that there, I can do this, this, and this. They didn't see all the things that came with it and how it and the big toe are kind of interlinked together.
Right. And putting pressure on that area where the two sesamoid bones are, what does that do? Like, what's the benefit of being able to find the pressure on that area?
Oh, well, at that point in time, it's going to light somebody up the chain. So somebody up the chain. This is what people, this is one of the things. People say, and this is what we talk about, where somebody will say, in order to access the glute, you have to access the big toe. And then you go, no, you don't. Watch. We show you really fast how, but this becomes the fun part. So if I press on the big toe, people say, and people at home, you can try this. If you press on the big toe and touch your glute, nothing. Yeah. Press harder, touch your glute, nothing. Okay. Now, get on the sesamo bones, sit on the sesamo bones, and then all of a sudden say, okay, now I'm going to go ahead and put down my big toe. Now you start to feel like glute work. Now you say, okay, now I'm going to go ahead and I just want to move a little bit. I just want to move it a little bit. Now the glute works, but you need those things first. Just press down your big toe, Yeah. But I think but you're talking about a rotational issue because what's happening, you rotate one way and then that sets down and then all of a sudden the glute says we're going to rotate the other way. The big toe, the rotation's not there, so the glute says, yeah, whatever. But it's just like I said, it's one of those things where if you look at it, what's going on, it goes up the chain. So based on where the pressure's at, is my knee going to lock out or not lock out? Am I going to use my hamstring? Am I not going to use it? What am I going to use based on this thing here? I thought you were getting Jenn. So it becomes like, what am I going to do with these things as I hit these things,
Yeah. And to be clear, sesamoid bones, because I think people are unclear on what those actually mean. Like in the foot, there are these two little pea-sized bones that are floating. They're actually embedded in the, which tendon? I should get this right. They're embedded in the flexor hallucis brevis tendon.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that seems like it's kind of important to know too. Like just understanding what that tendon does can be useful, right?
Yeah, well, it's kind of like, when you look at the kneecap, you got it. If you look at the kneecap, same thing is embedded in something, and so, and when does it move? When doesn't move? And kind of like the kneecap, if if the toe is moving, they move. If the foot's moving, they don't move.
Right.
Same thing with like the kneecap. If the tibia is moving, the kneecap moves. If the femur is moving, it doesn't move.
Right.
So it has these two distinct things of I need to move at this time, not at this time.
Interesting. So how does the big toe work during change of direction? And then also how does the first MTP joint work during change of direction?
Well, the biggest thing with change of direction is when you put it down, the pressure is going to shift on it.
Okay.
And so basically what's happening with change of direction is it's allowing the collision to happen. So when I put that down, it's going to allow this collision to happen between the torso. It's like this is things where we have these things where the torso is going to collide with the femur. And based on that collision, I'm going to change directions.
Got it.
A lot of times people want to push off, but it's the collision that's going to help you change direction. But based on where that sits down at, if your heel, like say your heel sits down first, your heel will slide. Then when that hits, now the collision is going to happen. So it like I say it's then dig into the ground and stop everything so you can push back up.
So knowing, like understanding all of this, like a lot of the big toe exercises that are given, right? Toe yoga. You're supposed to be able to, from a seated position or a standing position, lift your big toe straight up.
Right.
Is this useful?
Well, anything's useful, but
right.
I mean, the thing is, I would go this way, and I would flip the question. If I can't do that, what happened? Nothing. So is it useful to be able to pick the toe up, wiggle the toes, play the piano with the toes? If you paint brushing, sure. If you play the piano, if you drive with your toes, sure. If I'm trying to be athletic, I can be athletic without doing those things. I can be highly athletic without doing those things. So that becomes the question is, what happens if I can't do these things? So people have made up a standard that doesn't exist. So I made this standard of toe flexibility to meet what? To say what? To say that I have this toe that I can stretch all the way back and go this way. Okay. But once again, if you look at that situation again, like when are you going to be in that situation? When are you going to be in that situation? And so that becomes the other part too, is that once you get to these things of these standards, for what? So is it cool? Like anything else, now if you somebody with maybe arthritis, you might be wanting to do these things.
Right.
Different story again, but just everyday life, okay. You can do it. Nice party trick. That's one of those party tricks.
Yes.
Just like with the tongue, when people go, "Hey, watch me tie this cherry stem with my tongue." Good party trick. What else does it mean? Nothing.
No, what about, and again, none of this is actually supported by the research, like the big toe extension exercise. I went looking this morning. I couldn't find anything that said that this was going to, in any way, shape, or form, like improve your performance or improve your foot health. Again, unless you've got some sort of foot issue, like that's very specific. So what about like extending the big toe away from the other toes?
Well, the biggest thing is to remember that, when do you want this big toe to work?
Right.
When do I want this big toe to work? How much do I want it to work? Because at some point in time, you may have the foot trying to rotate around the big toe.
Yes.
Other times you may have the big toe trying to steer the foot.
Right.
So for instance, if I want to turn left, well, I'm going to try and make my big toe extend away from the other toes to help turn my foot left or right, whatever the case may be. If I want to turn my foot right, well, I'm having a big toe close down the other toes to turn my foot right. So it becomes as a directional thing, it's very great, you know. And when this is going to happen, you know, it can happen when you're in the air or on the ground. But it has that kind of pull to it that it can make things like go in a certain direction. But I don't think people have thought about it as that there. And we've seen it like even certain, you know, in most time when you see this at is when people are running and they're trying to turn, you know, and you see the foot turn. Well, that's the big toe that turned, you know. But a
Which
lot of
that
times,
which that right there, because a lot of people think that the change of direction comes from the hip.
yeah, no, it's coming from the big toe. It's basically gonna whip you around. So you know, even like with rotations, you know, people call rotations revolutions. You know, and you got to remember,
Hmm.
rotation is that I'm rotating around the center of mass, and then revolution revolve around some other object. You know, and so with that there, you have now the body's when that foot plants, the body's gonna swing around the leg. So if I just turn, so if I just turn my hip, you know, that's what people, you know, internal rotation, whatever they want to call it. But if you're running and you're trying to change directions and you're in a squatted position and you turn your hip, you're gonna pull the leg back into you.
Right.
You're gonna fold up. That's what people, you have to remember how things work on the ground versus not on the ground. So if you're on the ground and you take the leg that's in the air, swing leg, and turn it, you know, internally rotate it, it's gonna fold up on you. You know, externally, it's gonna fold up on you and gonna cross you up. Works great for yoga. If I want to do a figure four in yoga, works great. Externally rotate that leg and fold the heel comes up to the knee, works great. Doesn't work great while you're running. So at that point in time, you have to take the toe and you have to make the toe steer the foot in the direction you're trying to go. When it plants, you swing around it.
Which would have implications for training too. Like, again, what are you trying to accomplish, right?
Yeah, what are you trying to accomplish? So, but you gotta remember, a lot of people are looking at this from I'm a stand up with knees locked out position.
Right.
And so at that point in time, yeah, what do people do? People, you know, think I'm gonna turn my leg at the hip versus, because if your leg is straight and you turn the toe, guess what? Then you get what at the ankle. See how it's different?
Yes.
But if you're running and it's bent and you turn it, guess what happens? Everybody turns. So that becomes what the perception is people have this perception of movement based from this, but that's when you are running and it's under pressure and that's happening, it doesn't work that way anymore.
Right.
So and I think that's what people get some of these words from, inversion, eversion, all these other things. But you go, if you bend that knee, guess what goes away? Inversion, eversion goes away.
Because everything's
Yeah.
locked into place.
Everything's locked into place.
Yeah.
So it becomes, you know, once again, I can use this thing to help steer me. But yes, most people think it's coming from the hip. It is not coming from the hip. It's coming because the big toe is actually pointing in that direction. And then you're going to basically swing around the leg once you plant.
That's interesting. Again, just because it could have so many implications for how exercises are instructed.
Right.
So you could totally change a person's experience and how quickly they're able to move and how like coordinated they're able to move based on where you instruct that from, where you instruct the change of direction from.
Right. So you can instruct. So even for instance, like say somebody is sitting down and you tell them to extend the leg, you know, and most likely they're gonna and it's how, like I said, it's one of those things that's weird. Sit down, sit in the chair, and go ahead and extend the lower leg. Now you're gonna feel great pressure on the kneecap. Why? Because you got this one muscle, these quads, not one muscle, but you got the quadriceps trying to do two things: lift the knee up and extend the leg, which that's where the pressure's at. Now, if you say, "Hey, I'm just gonna go ahead and pull my big toe up," you know, now all of a sudden the leg extends because of where the movement's coming from. It's coming from the end position now. So the knee doesn't get bunched up. So at the kneecap is not bunched up anymore because it's trying to do these two things. It actually slides and glides like it's supposed to. But once again, yes, you can totally change the movement experience based on, you know, what can this thing do? So then all of a sudden, say you're sitting down, you know, and you could do, I'm gonna write figure eights now. I'll write figure eights with my big toe. So if I write a figure eight with my big toe, now I get my hip to move. If I try to write a figure 8 with my hip, the leg swings wide.
Yeah.
It becomes a different movement pattern. But at that point in time, why? Because the quad's locked up, and then I got to turn this, and then I got to lift the leg, and then and it's hard. But if I write with my big toe, all of a sudden, and guess what? I'm getting more movement at the hip, because now I get the actual figure 8, up, down, and around, up, down, and around.
Okay, this is good. This should be, hopefully this is good food for thought for some people. It's good food for thought for me. Got all kinds of like ideas swimming in here.
So yeah. Well, even this here. I mean, think about, and it's just another thing. So think about this here. So people press the gas pedal.
Yes.
You're driving. So same thing. You could now. This is where like I said, I'm gonna press the gas pedal by taking my big toe, and I'm going to try and curl it.
Okay.
So I'm going to try and curl it, the big toe. Now, when I try and curl the big toe, you see a different movement at the ankle.
Yes.
And so
very much so.
So it becomes a different. Now the ankle is actually flexing.
Right.
Based on just trying to curl the big toe, and then I'm gonna, and so now if you do ankle circles with the big toe, you can feel the joint.
That's super interesting.
If you just wiggle your foot around in circles, you don't, you know. So yeah, it can't. You totally change the movement. It's just understanding this toe is kind of cool, and it does way more than just try and push off the ground.
Right. Well, and as you just said, it doesn't really do the pushing off the ground very well. So it's not something you really want to focus on.
Yeah. So, but think about that. Think about you in ankle rehab now.
Right. And well, that's what.
Instead of just rolling your foot around, now you go, no, I'm actually going to put some pressure on this thing, because I'm going to try and curl this under, and then I'm going to do this and let the big toe lead these movement patterns.
Yes.
So yeah, totally different stuff. But a lot of people are used to moving the hip. And like I said, when you move the hip, you get different movement patterns. If you move from the toe, it's a whole different day as far as, the joints, the pressure, you can actually now pull the big toe, like you can isolate it and pull the big toe up towards you, which would make the leg flex.
Right.
Which is now the quad, because the whole thing about now the quad's free. Versus if I extend the quad, if I try to lift the knee and extend the knee with the quad, I get friction there, because the quad is caught. Quad is caught. It's trying to extend it can't do those things. It can, but doesn't very well. But then once you say, no, I'm just going to take the big toe and pull the big toe towards me, push the big toe, pull the big toe, push the big toe, the quad stays off and it just follows along now. And all it does is allow you to support the leg.
Interesting. Huh.
So yeah. So then you get other muscles to play. So then all of a sudden the hip flexor muscles, they actually support the leg, not the quad. And that's a different story now.
Mm-hmm. Which again, it'll feel very different for someone.
Feel very different. Yeah. Feel very different.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So it's just the things you could do. And then, like I said, if you straighten your leg up, you're sitting down, straighten your leg out, and you try to, once again, extend the big toe away from the MTP joint and then push it back into it. Same thing. How people do the hip thing where they sit on the ground, they lift it, do that with the big toe instead. Yeah. So now just try to pull the big toe away from the MTP joint, push it back into the MTP joint, pull it away, push it back down. Different experience again. Now,
super interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because most people are trying to lift with the quad,
right?
Which is why there's a restriction in the first place. Because the quad, you lock out your knee, and so now you got a restriction. If you lift it with the big toe, the restriction goes away. Just push it up, and pull it down. All of a sudden, you don't have the same restriction anymore.
Huh.
So yeah, so people doing a lot of hip mobility stuff you don't have to do. Just understand how the big toe works. Or they're doing hip flexor strength stuff you don't have to do. Just understand how the big toe works.
Right. And essentially, if you understand how the big toe works, you change the input. You can alter the input pretty significantly between understanding the big toe and understanding the sesamoid bones and the role that they play in distributing pressure. Yeah,
distributing pressure in stem line and things like that. And the best part about this too is how the system helps. That's the beauty of this. Because if you look at it, you go, I'm pulling on the big toe. Okay, the big toe, I'm pulling on it here. So I have to raise the foot up because the other systems come to help out.
Right.
The other systems come to help out. So same thing, if I pull my big toe back towards me, I can pull it up high enough. If I just pull it, if I just say, I'm going to pull the big toe towards me, you know, and then I'm going to push the big toe. So I'm going to pull it towards me and then I'm going to push away from me. My leg raises up, drops down.
Yeah.
You know, I'm going to take my big toe to the left. I'm taking my big toe to the right. Now I'm into my hip stuff. Kind of easy.
Yeah.
Versus if I just try to pick up my leg, like, you know, and that's what a lot of people do. They don't understand that part of the foot. So what do? They pick up their leg like it's broke.
Right.
You know, like you put your hands on your leg and picked it up and moved it. You know how when you have a cast on or something like that, if you actually pick your leg up, that's how people are moving.
Yeah. Which isn't going to be super efficient.
No, especially when you stand up and try to move again, because that's not.
So the transference will be super low. Like there will be no transference.
Right,
yeah.
Right. And then once again, talking about rehab, some other stuff. Yeah, it's a whole, you know. And so when people have a cast on their foot, guess what they can do? They can still exercise the big toe.
Yeah.
Because that's what you're losing out on. When you put a cast on the foot, you know, you're losing out on what the big toe does.
Yeah.
The other little toes are fine, but it's the big toe you lose out on that. But they never rehab the big toe once they take the cast off the foot.
Okay, this is good. I feel like this is like, you know, like mind-blowing stuff. Like, you know, if you really think about it, this could be pretty mind-blowing.
It's cool. It's cool. It's cool stuff, you know. So then, you know, but the part is like, and the stuff people can follow along at home. So, and we just did one leg. So this becomes the fun part. Do both legs. So if you sit down and now you can do, like, you know, people do flutter kicks.
Oh, like that?
Yeah, but don't do it like that. Don't do it like that. Don't do it like that. Keep the foot flexed.
Keep the foot flexed. Okay, I'm doing a flutter kick, everybody that's listening to this via podcast. So I'm keeping the foot flexed like that.
Yeah. Now just lift up the toes, lift and push the toes up and down.
Oh, weird. Okay. It makes your quads, it makes your hip flexors a lot less tired.
Yeah, because they don't have to hold them anymore.
Yeah.
So so that's a different way of doing the flutter kick versus the other way where you point the toes and now you got the quads trying to do all this back and forth, back and forth, back and forth.
Now, but the toes pointed looks so much prettier for what it's worth.
Yeah, the toes point, you know, because everybody, that's what we've been trained, like the lines, you know, the points.
The lines. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the lines. Yeah, everybody likes the lines and stuff like that. So, yeah. But then that way you could do that things, you know, even as here. So same thing, and point your feet out away from each other, you know, and then same thing, do the flutter kicks. So you can take your feet, point them out, and point left and right. There you go. Now, same thing. Oh. Not that way. Not that way. Pull the toe. There you go. See?
Okay. And again, it's cool because it does make it much more sustainable rather than just, you know, fatiguing out like everything in your hip flexors.
Yeah. And when you go that way too, what happens is you start to get this other move that wasn't there before. Mm-hmm. So now, you know, before I was straight up and down vertical. Now I get this diagonal pattern at the femur. So now it's going at the femur. Now I get this diagonal pattern. Now I get this up and down pattern. Now I get this diagonal pattern. So you're talking about accessing what's in there in different ways because now it's going this way. It's going this way. It's going this way. So now instead of just going in circles, you get it's a different once again.
Yeah. The big toe. And for everybody listening, I actually didn't know what we were going to be talking. Well, I had an outline, but I didn't know where this was going to go today. This is super interesting.
The big toe is cool. Yeah, it's just been misunderstood. It's been misunderstood for the longest because it's the biggest bone. You know, it's the biggest bone. It should take the most load. You should be able to. Yeah, no. It's a good break. It's a good counterbalance. It's some things you can do with it. But the beauty is in the structure. It only having 2 pieces versus 3 pieces. That's one of the beauties of it. You know, and then the other beauty of his MTP is the structure of MTP joint and sesame bones, you know, and everything. Just like, you know, people, you know, we talk about anterior, posterior tibialis muscles and everything. And one of those, or both of them trying to attach to what? The first met.
Right.
And so if I work that, I can work that and get some more action in the big toe because it's actually gonna make the big toe wiggle.
Yes. That makes sense.
So there's a lot of cool things you can do, you know, just understanding this, that it's a movement piece. It's not a stand on me and beat me piece. It's a movement piece.
And if you look at it in relation to the rest of your foot, it's pretty small. like in relation to the actual like sole of the foot.
Foot, yeah.
So
Even
it's
even look at it, most people's second toe is longer than their big toe.
mine is for sure, yeah. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
interesting that like we've become so fascinated with the big toe as a it's something that like can create speed and help us propel ourselves forward.
Yeah, and so, but like I say, you have to think different, but most people
Yeah.
don't think different. Like, hey, instead of trying to push the toe down as you run or walk, when they get pressure on it, pull it up and watch how it just plops you over.
Yeah. Which is very effective if anybody tries this when they go for their next run. Like you might
Yeah,
be surprised. I always am. My mile splits improve dramatically when I think about
yeah.
that.
So yeah, well, that's what we don't, and that's the hardest part about athletes. As we're finding out, there's so many movement strategies the body can deploy.
So many, yes. Yeah,
So, and we don't know which ones they're deploying. We don't know if
right.
this is a toe person. We don't know if this is this person. We don't know if it's that person. But you can have somebody run fast because they understand, like, oh, I'm just gonna push and pull this back, push and pull this back.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for that enlightening lesson on the big toe and the first MTP joint. I hope all of you listening enjoyed that. I don't know, I can't remember what we're covering next week, but we'll be back.
Yeah, and I hope
Another
people
topic.
listening try and follow along. Just try and really follow along with the process and work it out. Yeah.
Yes. And if you are listening and you want to see me attempting some of the video, you can only see my foot, but it is on YouTube as well. So you can totally check out the full video there.
Oh, it's gonna be
All
on
right.
YouTube. Bet.
We're on YouTube. We are on
Yeah,
YouTube. We are on Spotify. So check us out. Come find us.
yeah.
There's a book if you want to know more about the topics.
And there's a website.
And there's a website. So we got all the things.
So.
All right, everybody. We'll see you next week. Thank you.